Hello friends and welcome back. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, which you can kind of think of as a big free vending machine that spits out nothing but amazing things to see and do in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Today we're going to be cruising over the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, an area that I'm kind of familiar with because I used to drive back and forth across the top of the state when I lived out in Buffalo, which was miserable, heading down to New York City and back, so I've been through this area a few times. However, one of our channel members lives out here and gave me a personal tour a few weeks ago, and when I found out there's a museum out here dedicated to Glenn Curtiss, founder of what would become Curtiss-Wright Aviation and builder of the plane that we're flying today, the die was cast, and here we are. So this is the newly released Curtiss C-46, which I'll tell you more about a little bit later in the flight, but for anyone wondering what we've got in store for this trip, because how many people are like, yeah, let's fly over the Finger Lakes. There's a little bit of stuff to see on the ground that looks pretty good, a lot of history, but the natural landscape out here, I think, just looks beautiful. It's not perfect. We're going to see some flat trees, some flat buildings in a couple spots, but overall, it's a pretty cool trip, and it's just going to be very, very chill. This isn't like flying the F-16 around. It's just a big, lumbering, slow, chill plane. So that's what we're going to do with this one. And between the plane and the scenery out here, for some reason, the immersion factor feels very high for me. I'm not sure what it is, but if I was going to rate it as far as immersion out of 10, maybe like an 8 out of 10. If it wasn't for the flat spots, it would be even higher, but it's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and get in and start up. This is a fairly complicated startup procedure, so I do have my note cards ready. One thing you want to know if you're thinking about getting this plane, or if you have it and you're wondering why things aren't working like they're supposed to, if you look down on the side of the cowl flaps here, this is the open position. Even though it doesn't say that, it says that this is the closed position. If you could look around the side of this here, you would see that, and I didn't know that until I was watching John Beckett's channel. I was wondering why some of my temperatures were acting funny. And he noticed that when he got outside the plane, that changes the way the cowl flaps look. So if we hop back outside again, see, now they're open down here. So I don't know what's going on with that. They'll probably fix it on a future update, but just be mindful of that. Okay, so we got to get full mixture. And this does have auto rich, auto lean, all that great stuff, full props. And the fuel tanks are set to the center, and this one's kind of tricky too, because even though you put your arrow onto that one, it'll still turn the inside one, so you got to kind of move the camera over and reach over there. A lot of times when you're trying to work the red one, or the yellow one, the red one will turn, so I got that set up in advance so we don't spend 10 minutes trying to open the right fuel tank. And it looks like we only are going to have fuel in the aft and center, but I'm probably going to leave it on one tank the whole time. It's only about 100 miles in the air, and this thing has a huge range. So I think we're going to be okay with just one tank. Okay, after that, we got to turn the battery on and the master ignition on. Battery, master ignition, and then the magnetos, both to both. And you're supposed to turn the inverters and the generators on as you're doing each engine, but I'm just going to go ahead and turn them on right now because it'll still work, and I won't have to come back down here and mess with it later. Okay, and now we have to turn the boosters on, and for this one I had to set up a different camera because, as you can see, this one you won't be able to see it from the regular camera angle, so we'll turn both of them on now. And it says once you get up in the air, you should turn these off, but every time I've done that, the engine shut off, so we're just going to leave those on for the whole flight, and then we won't have to worry about that. All right, to start this up, you got to hit the starter, wait 2 seconds, then the mesh, and wait 5 seconds. Let's open this window. And then hit the primer after that. So starter, mesh, primer. Got it. 2, 3, 4, 5, and then primer. That should get going. There we go. Come on, baby. Fire up. I think I got to crack the throttles a little bit. There we go. That'll do it. All right, so we'll do the same thing on the other one over here. Start. Mesh. 3, 4, 5. And when I was watching AvAngel's review, she said that when the windows open and close, although they're very loud when they open and close, the engine note wasn't changing, but it is. Maybe she had an earlier version that it wasn't doing that, if that was the case with her, but as you'll hear when I shut this window, it will get quieter. Ready? Gets a little bit quieter. You can definitely tell a difference. You'd think it'd be a heck of a lot louder with the window open, but it is what it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our radio on. This does have the good old Sperry. We're going to use a little bit of this. It's kind of finicky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I think I'm going to try to use, anyway, an altitude hold once we get up to 4,000 feet, which I'll go ahead and set right now. And I couldn't get the vertical speed to work. Even trying to manipulate it in the sim, I couldn't get it to work right, but with my external controls, sometimes it does. So our cruise altitude is going to be 4,000 feet. Let's check the baro. This is the live weather. Right now we have no wind, which is great. And you can see it's not very cloudy either. And it's about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, evening. And then we're going to do some heading holds, but it won't even do that until I get about 15 miles out. So let me just zoom in here on a little nav map. I'm going to go ahead and set our initial heading that we're going to try to grab, which will be 225 once we come up around the top of this place right now. So I'll go ahead and set that now that we have the radios on. And then we'll look at the Google map and we'll start taxiing. 225. All right, we'll just leave that there for now. Okay, so let's look at the Google map real quick. There's Northeast United States, New England's up here, New York's here. Buffalo's over here. We've taken a few flights around there, and we've done New York City. Haven't really done anything in upstate New York yet. So when I used to drive down to the city, I'd come from Buffalo along what's called the 90 right there, the interstate, and then come on down there. I'll tell you a story about one of my trips on the 90 in a little bit. Okay, so we're leaving from this big gray area right here. I'll tell you what that is once we get up there. We're going to come out this way, come around this side of it, come up to the north, circle around the top of it, because you're going to want to see what's in this big gray area, and then come down here, cut around the western side of Dresden, come down along Seneca Lake here, cut to the east of Dundee, and then we want to see Watkins Glen here at the southern end, so we're just going to cut across this way and then zip back over here so we can see Watkins Glen on the left side of the plane, and they have a big race course out there, so we'll see that, or racetrack I should say, not for horses, but for cars. Then we'll come up this way by Hammondsport, where the museum is for Glenn Curtis, and then cruise up here by Naples, cut around this way, skirt the southern end of these Finger Lakes over here, and then cut across Letchworth State Park, and our landing field, which is a big grass strip, is going to be right up here. And again, it's about 106 miles in the air, and the sim says it's going to be about 45 minutes or so flight time. Okay, so let's see what else we got going on here. The landing light's already off, so that's good. Let's go ahead and just get our transponder on. And you can see it's hard to tell what that says over there, so if you just go all the way to the right and then back one, that'll get you to altitude mode. Alright, parking brake off. And it said in real life you're not supposed to use the rudder pedals while you're on the ground. You're supposed to use differential thrust and differential braking, so we'll give that a try, even though you can steer a little bit with your pedals on the ground. But this thing does not do anything quickly. So we'll go nice and smooth and easy. No add-ons for this flight. There weren't any available. There's a few little airports in upstate New York, but probably not worth the performance drag. I got everything turned up real high. So when I would usually, if you're new to the channel, usually any add-ons that we've got, I try to get freeware whenever we can. I'll link those in the video description. There's nothing in this video description because we have no add-ons. But the link to this flight plan will be in there if you want to take it just like we are and you know how to use little NavMap. You can click on that link and open it in little NavMap. And I'll also put our bookmark file in there. I am using the braking now because this is kind of a tight turn. And the bookmark file will just put all of the different landmarks that I've bookmarked. We'll take a look at little NavMap at the end so you can see what I'm talking about. But it's helpful if you want to try to see the things that we're seeing to see those show up in little NavMap. So that'll be handy too. And of course the link to our Discord server. If you haven't hopped in there yet, very cool place to hang out, join that conversation. We talk about everything aviation in there. Really good time. Plane reviews, upcoming flights, past flights, gear reviews, and just general aviation talk. Very cool place. And if you want to join our flight plan competition, our quarterly flight plan competition, this will probably be the last flight for this quarter before we cut that off. I think we've got 4 or 5. I'm going to whittle it down to 3. And I'll post all those videos, and these are all member recommended flights. So at the end of the quarter, you can rewatch those videos if you want, or watch them for the first time. Go ahead and vote on them. In YouTube, I'll put a poll up there on our community page, and the winner will get a gift card to the sim vendor of their choice. This will be our second competition. Alright, turning around at the end of this runway is tricky because there's no turnaround area. So I'm going to come way over to the right here, and then just try to... And if you stop moving, it's hard to get it moving again while you're trying to turn. So you really got to finesse it. As you can see, the interior modeling is great. Most of the stuff works. Not everything. Everything that you want to work except for the autopilot every time for me, but it's probably a user error, like usual. Alright, so we're going to come off the runway a little bit here. Stomp hard on the brake. Keep it moving forward. Turn, baby, turn. There we go. Whoa. Ground loop. And I should mention, maybe 2 flights ago, I referred to the ground loop effect as a gimbal lock, and someone pointed out that that's not called a gimbal lock, and you're right about that. The reason why, I've said that a couple times in a couple of our flights. When I was in elementary school, I did a science fair project that involved pushing a tricycle backwards to show what that effect is like, and my science teacher kept referring it to it as a gimbal lock. But I think a gimbal lock has something to do with a gyroscope getting locked up on spacecraft. But if I say that, I'm referring to a ground loop. Okay, 1 notch of flaps, landing lights on. And our rotate speed is going to be 96 miles per hour. The tail should come up around 80 miles per hour. And we need to lock our tail wheel if I can even see it. There we go. All right, you guys ready? Let me get my notes. Scroll down just a little bit here. All right, we're all set. Let's do this. Listen to those engines. Awesome. Looks like I'm a little bit right of center, but that's okay. Still no wind. Loving that. Alright, so I'm going to need just a few minutes to kind of get this thing set up and stabilized once we get in the air, and then I'll start telling you about all this stuff around us here. Look how slow and lumbering this is. Great. Just fantastic. Alright, so now we can rotate. Up we go. And gears up. Beautiful. And flaps up. And we'll go ahead and pull those RPMs back a little bit just so I can see our manifold pressure for no other reason, which is right behind the prop levers there. Alright, so I'm going to shoot for 4,000 feet, and once I get there, hopefully I will be able to do an altitude hold. We'll see, because it's going to be really hard to fly this thing and maintain our altitude, and look at our notes, and look out the window, and navigate, but we're going to give it the old college try. So it's kind of flat out here. As we get more towards the west, it's going to start to get really hilly, and there's even 2 ski slopes out there. I was not aware of that. They're not real big, but they're out there, so it's hilly enough for ski slopes. But it's not like the Rockies or the Alps or anything like that for sure. Alright, so I'm just going to trim up a little bit. Try to get us into a decent rate of climb here. And man, I mean, you got to put an input in, wait, see what the plane does. Add a little bit more trim, wait, see what it does. Nothing is fast. Alright, we'll give it a little more throttle because it's just barely creeping along here. Alright, we'll go ahead and start that turn. Get going around towards the north. So this lake we're going to see right in front of us, it's kind of coming into view now, is Cayuga Lake, the longest of the Finger Lakes at 39 miles from tip to stern. And it gets down to 435 feet at its lowest point, which is pretty dang deep for a skinny lake like this. You know, these things are kind of like the US equivalent of the Scottish Lochs. They just don't look quite as cool because they aren't surrounded by a bunch of big mountains. The fields look good. Most of the default buildings look good, definitely believable, especially from 4,000 feet. But again, there's just going to be a few of those spots where we're going to get some photographic trees and a few photographic buildings. Other than that, looks really neat out here. So there's the lake. We're going to see a lot more that look just like that. See how flat these are? Most of the rest of these, as we start heading west, are going to have big hills around them, which looks very cool. Alright, so our departure airport was from a now closed runway on the former site of the massive Seneca Army Base. Seneca Army Depot is what it was officially called. And if you're curious, that strip was about 7,000 feet long. Just the right size for the mostly cargo aircraft flying in and out from the 1940s until they closed it down in the 1990s. And that's a prison right there. That's called 5 Points State Prison. That's a maximum security place right down there to our left. And though it didn't become public knowledge until much later, down at this Army depot, its earliest use was storing radioactive material used in the Manhattan Project. And then during the Cold War, it held the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the country, which was also never officially confirmed, but I think everyone suspects that was precisely what was going on down here. And though it's going to be much easier to see as we keep gaining some altitude, this whole base is filled with rows that run this way. And on all of these rows are little bunkers that used to hold whatever weapons were down here. They called them igloos when they were using them. And there are lots of them, hundreds of them probably. Alright, we're coming up to 3,500 feet now, right on course, just fine, everything's looking good. Let's close our cowl flaps. As we come around the northern side of it, you'll see some of the little bunkers they have up here on the northern end. Another interesting little footnote is that this base is home to the world's largest white deer population. And that's not albino, I should add, albino. They have brown eyes. They're just a very large collection of very rare white-tailed deer with all white coats. And according to the story I was reading, when they first fenced this thing in, they noticed a few of them, so they started intentionally over-hunting the brown-furred ones to concentrate the recessive gene of the white ones. And now they say they got about 200 of the white ones living down here with the brown-haired variety. Okay, altitude hold. We'll put our heading hold on. I'm going to leave the heading hold off for now, because we don't hit that yet. Let's see if we can stabilize here at 4,000. Alright, looks like we got it. And you can tell it kind of looks like you're pointing down, even though you're not. I think it's because the way that side of that window is kind of tilted down. Alright, it'll start getting around that overspeed noise around 180 miles per hour, so we'll just kind of keep pulling that back a little bit. And we'll take our westward turn here. Alright, see these bunkers down here? Oh, they look kind of flat. When you're coming from the other direction, because the way the shadows were, you could actually see a little bit of relief to those, or at least it looked like it because the way the shadows were. Alright, so once we get turned around heading towards the southwest, I'll try our heading hold. And it is holding the altitude, which is good. Still going a little bit fast. So down here to our left, once we get back over the water for this lake, between the Army Depot and the lake, is a place called the Sampson State Park. And during World War II, it was known as the Sampson Naval Training Station. And then during the Korean War, they called it the Sampson Air Force Base. And as far as I could tell, both were basic training camps when they were using them. But all that's left now of the original facilities are a few old buildings in the brig, which has been turned into a museum. But they left all 38 miles of the roads for hiking trails, I guess. Or running marathons if you want to. And it's going to be right up here. So there's our runway, and then here's where the big park is. So when we look at the satellite map, you'll see at the end, they just got all these roads out here. There's a couple of structures still standing down in this area here. But now, I don't know what they have in the museum. I should have checked on the website to see what that was. But I didn't. Alright, let me see if I can kind of get back on our course here, a little nav map, and then I'll try that heading hold. You know what I like? Look at these big side windows here. You can see almost right underneath the plane, which is just great. Big, long lakes. This is Seneca Lake here. I'll tell you about that one in just a second. But let's take a look at this park. So you'll see a little square thing right here, and that is the old brig, the lockup. And I do have the boats on. We'll see a few sailboats out here too. Of course, all the harbors and stuff will look good as usual. But look at that. I mean, it looks good. The fields look great. They got some submerged docks down there. There it is. There's the brig right there. So I don't know what they're using that runway for now, if anything. I'm sure someone's using it for something. Alright, we're almost on our course, so I'm going to hit the heading hold here in about 15 seconds. Shorelines look really good. So this is Seneca Lake here, the one we're over now, which is the largest in terms of surface area. It's 67 square miles. Alright, I just hit our heading hold. And also the deepest at 618 feet. And if you like to wet a line from time to time, it's also the lake trout capital of the world. And because it's so deep, right up here on the other side of the river is a little town of Dresden. And the Navy has their primary test facility for sonar equipment up here. I'll show you where that is. Well, you can't really see much of it. This is the power station here, and here's where the Navy's test facility is. But back before all that got started, Dresden, which is named after the town in Germany, was settled by a bunch of religious zealots in the late 1700s who called the place Jerusalem. And they were followers of a they-them who referred to themselves as the public universal friend. So Dresden's right over here. It's not a very big town at all. We'll see just a little bit of the southern end of it. That part looks pretty good, the little boats down there. So we got some marinas. See some little boats out there. But the public universal friend is an individual who claimed to have died of a severe illness in 1776 and was reanimated as a genderless evangelist, which was, unfortunately for that crew, a few centuries ahead of their time. Man, if that happened today, they'd probably get a whole state for themselves. Probably not sharing a border with Mississippi, though. Alright, our next heading is going to be 185, so we'll get ready to turn on that one. Look at that bridge down there. Even that looks pretty good. See that little guy? Alright, 185. And you see this thing here? I don't know if that's maybe an old landfill. It's a big bulge in the ground. That's kind of what old reclaimed landfills look like, though. Look at that. It's not a fort. There aren't any forts around here, unfortunately. So there's that Navy facility, the test facility for the sonar stuff. They say it is a world-class place. Marina looks great down there. And one final note about Dresden. After it was renamed Dresden in 1811, from 1833 to 1877, it was the terminus for the Crooked Lake Canal, which was part of a much larger canal network that linked the Finger Lakes to Lake Erie up in the north. So that canal ran from there over to that one over there, which I'll tell you about once we look at it. And that one is an interesting shape. You can kind of see it. It looks like a big Y. So it splits off, and there's another little shorter part of it over here. But getting back to Seneca Lake here, this one that's off to our left, this region, along with most of the interlake zones, makes a great microclimate for vineyards. So this place is like the wine cask of the East Coast. I read they have over 50 wineries out here, but looking at the Google map, they might even have more than that. They've got a lot of them. And they've even got something called the Wine Trail, which sounds like a very highbrow way to get sloshed and check out the amazing beauty of the area until you black out. And as far as the geology of the lakes go, there are 11 of them in all, which would be called polydactyly, if that extra finger was attached to your hand. And millions of years ago, these lakes started as northward flowing streams that ran through a region a bit more mountainous than what we see today. And over the course of dozens of ice ages and glaciation cycles, glaciers moved down from the north, smoothed out the hills, and continued gouging out the area where the lakes are now, refilling them for the last time during the last glacial retreat, which was roughly 10,000 years ago. Actually, that's not entirely correct. This isn't meltwater that's in here today. This one to our left, and all the others are refilled from local streams and springs for some of them. And they've got some pretty clear water in some of these. I'll tell you about one up here that we'll see as we're coming in that's extremely clear. And since I mentioned the Scottish lochs earlier, just to give you an idea of how these would size up in a good old-fashioned lake throwdown, Lake Seneca here to our left is roughly 16 miles longer and has over twice the volume as Loch Ness. But the old water beast in Scotland gets to enjoy a little bit more privacy because her lake is about 130 feet deeper. I love this. I mean, I wish there were a few more boats out there, but I'll take what we can get. That is a nice touch. Very nice. All right, up here to the right side of the plane in just a minute, we'll be able to see it as we look out through the co-pilot seat, is the town of Dundee, incorporated in 1848, with a current population of around 1,700. And though it's always been just a tiny little place out here in the country, it gave rise to an industrial giant in the food business. In 1949, a Cornell University graduate named Arthur S. Walcott started a little packaging company out here that in the 1950s was the first to package frozen grape juice. And in the 70s, they launched the nation's first frozen apple juice concentrate, which everybody loved in the 70s. And then through a series of acquisitions, they bought up all kinds of other produce freezing and canning operations, and now they're the world's largest processor of canned vegetables. And the company Mr. Walcott started is Seneca Foods, now headquartered up in Fairport, New York, which is just southeast of Rochester, about 20 miles from here. All right, it's going to come into view in just a second. Not that it's much to look at, but there it is. And they've even got their own stock car racing track, so all you that want to make fun of us rednecks down here in the south, they got those up here too. It's called the Outlaw track. There it is right there, see it? Beautiful. Neat little place. All right, we're going to take another turn here in just a minute to a heading of 138, cross over the other side of the lake, and get ready to take a look at Watkins Glen. That little clicking sound is our trim wheel, by the way, which is working furiously. Okay, now we got about a 7-knot headwind, which is going to be a problem on landing because if it's still blowing that way, it'll be a tailwind. We'll make it work, though. All right, 138. So on one of the trips, I got the GPS autopilot to work, which was just great because I didn't have to mess with anything, and then it never worked again. Although I always feel like we're cheating in a plane like this using a GPS autopilot, but it was nice for what we're doing on this channel. All right, let's check our baro again. I'm very grateful for the heading hold, though. And I did do some radio navigation. That was cool, and that worked. And there's tons of VOR stations out here. But it's just too much work to try to track the notes and the landmarks and everything. Is this a chill flight or what? I mean, I just love it. It's really, really cool. And it was great to get a personal tour from one of our members. And I'll make that offer to anyone. If you live in a cool area or are just familiar with a cool area, let's hop on Discord together. We'll turn on that audio chat room. Take me for a tour somewhere. There's no town that's too small for me. I love finding out cool things about small towns. So let's let the world see the place that made you. And now that they've redone Buffalo in the most recent SEM update, we may head back out there. One of our earliest flights was out there in Buffalo, and of course we've been to Niagara, I think twice now. And that helicopter tutorial that we did a while back was also in Niagara Falls, but they've redone Buffalo, so I might go back out there since I did spend a year up there in 1999. Worst year of my life. Oh, it was terrible. I always said when I was a kid, the two places I never wanted to live, even before I really knew why I didn't want to live there, was Buffalo and Detroit, which we also just flew over. And I wound up having to go there for a year. Just a bad experience. The weather was even worse than you could possibly imagine. Alright, we're going to do a little maneuvering back and forth across this lake here, and then we'll take a look at the town of Watkins Glen on the southern end of Lake Seneca here, which is right down over there. And you can see this area was, back in the day, before they kind of did some water control stuff, big mud flats. And they have those on the north and south ends of a lot of these lakes, which apparently are big bird sanctuaries. But now they got the town of Watkins Glen down there. And even though it's going to look a lot bigger from the air, the town's only got 100 more residents than little old Dundee back there. But I think they get a lot of tourists out here, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. Alright, we're starting to get some hills down here. Alright, I just need to watch our map because we're about to turn on a heading of 241. And there's a little bit of photographic trees. We're going to see a few patches like that. I should stop pointing it out. You might not even notice it. Alright, here we go. We'll start our turn over to heading 241. And I'll tell you about Watkins Glen. Awesome. Look at that thing. Unbelievable. Rivers look a little bit jagged, but the bridges over them do look good, so I'll give them points for that. So Watkins Glen got its start back in 1791 when the first European Americans started settling the area, calling it Jefferson in 1842, and renaming it to honor a local Dr. Watkins 10 years later. And the early economic driver out here was mills powered by water from Glen Creek running into town from the west, which we'll take a look at. And there is a huge gorge that you can see. I've driven through here. When you drive down this main road, the river runs up to this little treed area here. We'll see just a little bit of it. But it's cool. And I think that's one of the big local attractions out here. You can see that looks pretty flat there, but the buildings all have elevation over here. But Watkins Glen State Park is this little area that runs right through here. And they've got no less than 19 waterfalls over a run of just 2 miles. It's just absolutely beautiful. I've seen it in person, and it's awesome. I wonder how, like, in peak season, I mean, they're always probably getting tourists for this area here, but we're going to see the big race track here in a minute. I bet this place just blows up once everybody starts rolling in. And they do have their own super Walmart, so they got something going on. Alright, let's see if we can get a better view of the park area. Yeah, you can kind of see the little channel running through there, but it's just really heavily treed over. So the other and perhaps even larger draw is the big Watkins Glen International Road Course, which I've also seen and did not find impressive in the least. I'm not a huge NASCAR fan anyway, but it's going to be right over here. It's 3.45 miles long and was opened in 1956. After the locals got tired of people using 6.6 miles of the town's public roads for races. And the reason I didn't find it very enjoyable is because it's not an oval. So you go out there and throw up a lawn chair along a short stretch between any of the track's 11 turns, which makes your odds of seeing a wreck pretty small, never mind seeing much of anything else. I mean, it was like the cars go zipping by and then you wait a minute or two and they all go zipping by again. But it's big, really big. Neat area, huh? But apparently I was one of the only people that wasn't enjoying it because there was a lot of people out there. Alright, we're going to take another turn here in just a minute to, what is that, 309? Yep. The reason I was out here is because when I was in Buffalo, I was working for Black & Decker in their DeWalt division. If you didn't know that Black & Decker owns DeWalt. I was on the DeWalt side, and I was in charge of all the Home Depots in upstate New York, which at the time, and maybe still, was their biggest customer. And back then in the late 90s, DeWalt was heavily marketing in rodeo and NASCAR, and they'd hired Matt Kenseth as a driver, so we were always traveling around all the races, setting up tents and booths and stuff like that. And I think I may have mentioned this on one of our other previous flights, but I even got to drive around the parking lot of a Home Depot in, I don't know if it was a retired car or not. I mean, it looked like a real car, but that was really, really cool. And the thing you don't know until you sit in one of those is they build the car around the body of the driver. And I don't think Matt was the same size as me because it was really tight. And you've probably noticed if you've ever seen like in the car camera shot, that wheel is like right in your stomach. There is not a lot of elbow room in there. All right, I'm changing our heading to 309 now, and you can see some of these hills starting to come in. But man, loud, extremely loud. It was neat. Got to see a couple of the different cars. They all look the same, but they have a couple cars they tour around the country. Never did get to meet any of the drivers, though, unfortunately. Okay, so we're heading northwest now towards, I think it's called Keuka Lake, the next of the fingers on our journey, and we're just going to graze the southern end of that one as we check out a few cool spots down there. And along the way, we're going to see the tiny town of Bradford to our left, which is going to be up in this area right up here. I'm going to actually come over just a little bit. We turned a little bit too soon. And there's going to be a couple smaller lakes, these guys here, that kind of stretch up towards the bigger lake, the one that's the funny looking shape, the split one. But something worthy of mentioning about Lamoka Lake, which is the southern of these two, this isn't it here. I think it's Lamoka is right behind our console here. And then the bigger one up there is Winetta Lake up here, and then this is the actual Finger Lake. So these little guys here aren't Finger Lakes. But along Lamoka Lake, there's an archaeological site that was first excavated in 1920 that has produced, they say, the first clear evidence of an ancient hunter-gatherer site in the northeast United States, with finds dating to around 3500 BC. And I want to reiterate that is this region of the U.S. as far as earliest finds. If you've watched a lot of our other flights, you know that they found relics of much older populations in other parts of the country. But it sounds like the big thing with these guys is that they were a pre-pottery culture, so everything they found from them was stone and bone. They said they found some fishing nets too. I think it was the sinkers for the fishing nets, like the weights they use for them. There's no way any of that organic stuff would have lasted that long. There's the huge town of Bradford. Now we're getting in these hills. But just a beautiful area, isn't it? Look at that. Those fields look fantastic. Alright, so there's Keuka. I'm sorry, that's not Keuka. That's, what was that one called? Lamoka. And the archaeological site is somewhere up in here. There's nothing to see of it. I couldn't even see it on the satellite map. So maybe just a hole in the ground. Alright, so now we're going to turn to 297. Just a slight turn to the left here. But it doesn't sound like there's much of anything going on out here in Bradford, but peace and quiet. They got a population of under 1,000. It sounds like they probably got started as an old hitching post along one of the old trails running through the area in the late 1700s. So that's about all that Wikipedia had to say about that. Alright, see the shape of that lake now? That's pretty cool, huh? And that one is Keuka. And the name means either canoe landing or lake with an elbow in the native Seneca language, which must have been very difficult to interpret if one word could mean two entirely different things. And they call the area around it the cradle of the New York wine industry, so imagine they have no shortage of vineyards up here either. That's the only one that's got a separation like that. All the others look more like fingers, I guess. But one thing that's awesome about this lake is that the town of Hammondsport, at the very southern end of it, which is going to be right here, is the birthplace of Glenn Curtiss, the guy whose aviation companies would go on to build the very plane that we're flying right now. And we're going to see this exact plane down here. They got a little museum for him. But the guy got to start building water planes, which he tested right there on Keuka Lake. And on June 23rd of 1914, the Curtiss Model H took to the air as one of the world's first flying boats. And Wikipedia said it was the world's first, but after looking into that, a guy in France got one up in 1912. But Curtiss may have been the first to start producing them at scale, and the military was all over that. I think they said those were the ones they bought out in Annapolis when we took that tour of Baltimore. And they were flying those things right outside of Annapolis. But like the Wright brothers, Curtiss also got his start in the bicycle world, but he wasn't building them, he was racing them, eventually moving on to motorcycles. And despite their shared passion for two-wheeled transportation, Curtiss and the Wrights were not particularly fond of each other. The Wrights sued him for patent infringements 9 times, and Curtiss sued them 3 times. But the brothers eventually won all of them after a little prompting from a desperate U.S. military who really wanted them to get back out of court and into the designing room. Okay, so let's see if we can spot this plane. I'm going to have to look out the little window here. Oh, can I see it over the top? Oh, come on. I'm going to circle it. If I can see it, we'll see it out the side window, maybe. Of course, that bar is right in the way. All right, I'm going to bend down here and circle it. That's it. Commando. All right, so we got to take another turn here to 349 in just a minute. All right, not quite yet. But I guess apparently Curtiss and the Wrights buried the hatchet, and in 1929, 12 companies associated with both of their companies merged into Curtiss-Wright Aviation, becoming the largest airplane builder in the U.S. All right, so 349, here we go. And set. But by the time they had that merger, Glenn Curtiss had moved on from aviation and into the city building business down in South Florida, where he and a guy named James Bright developed the town of Hialeah, Opelika, and Miami Springs. And before he died in 1930 at the ripe old age of 52, he blessed the world with one final invention, producing something he called the bungalow, which was a precursor to the modern trailer-style RV. So good for you, Glenn Curtiss. Thank you for making life great. This is beautiful out here. Look at this. Look at that little house right out there in the middle of nowhere. Just incredible part of the country up here. Really nice. So I did check out the website for the Glenn H. Curtiss Museum, and they got a bunch of planes down there, and a lot of them are still airworthy. So that was pretty cool. I think they had, I don't know, maybe 10. Well, actually, it was even more than that. Let's see, probably, I'm trying to think. They had a couple different pages. It might have been as many as 15. So that's cool. All right, we've got a 14-mile cruise up to our next location, which is the town of Naples on the southern tip of Canandaigua Lake. And along the way, we'll fly past the quaint little town of Prattsburg, which, despite looking tiny, actually has more residents than Watkins Glen, though not much more. But the Glen did have that Walmart Supercenter. This place just has a Dollar General. It's going to be off to the right. We'll look at it out the co-pilot's window again. First officer's window. And I couldn't dig up much history about Prattsburg other than it was formed from an older town called Pulteney in 1813 and named after an original settler named John Pratt. And from 1889 to 1961, there was a train station along a small local line that ran from here down to a town called Canona, which is only about 5 miles to the south. I guess it'd be great if your horse broke down or something. All right, let's actually put a camera over here, so let's just see what we can see out the other side, see if we can see old Prattsburg. There it is. Lots of farms, few buildings. Look how hilly it's getting over there. Cool. All right, as we approach Naples, which is going to be down in a little valley at the end of this lake, we'll see Canandaigua Lake, which is going to be up to the north, also a finger. And this one is the fourth largest of them. And the 4 final lakes we'll see are all going to be smaller than this one. So they're going to get smaller from here. But we won't really see it till we're right over it because it is down in a little bit of a valley. And this one is renowned for the quality of its water, winning a couple of awards for the best drinking water in the state, both in 2013 and 17. I don't know if you can just dip a glass of water in there and start drinking it or what. And I read it's so clear you can see up to 50 feet down at some spots, which is incredibly clear for a big lake like this. But it's only 15 miles long, and 1.5 miles across, and it only gets down to about 276. But the other lakes from here are going to be even shallower than that. You can see all the plow lines and everything in there. Wonderful. And there's also a tiny, and I mean tiny, little 2-acre island up on the northern end of this lake, which is one of only 2 islands in all the Finger Lakes. And it used to be called Squaw Island until it was deemed far too offensive for sensible people to even utter a word like that, so they changed it to Skinno Island in 2021, thank goodness. Can't imagine how many people were upset by something called Squaw Island. That looks incredible. Really nice. That is just amazing. Love it. Alright, so Naples is going to be over this ridge up here. We'll kind of see it down in this area right here, and it looks like it's probably a beautiful, beautiful town. And that one sprang up from the remains of an old Native American village called Nundawau in 1789. And it was originally called Watkins Town, perhaps of some relation to Dr. Watkins, or Watkins Glen. And then Middletown a few years later, finally settling on Naples in 1808. And it was also one of the hubs of the Underground Railroad for slaves making their way up to Canada. And Wikipedia said a lot of the old houses still have secret rooms that they used to hide the slaves, which would certainly be cool to check out if anyone would let you do it. I have a feeling there's probably a lot of places like that up in these northern, close to the border towns. Well, those are some pretty big properties down there, huh? That'd be so nice to have that much land. You don't see anything like that here in Jacksonville, that's for sure. But they started planting grapes out here in the 1860s, and now this whole area around the south end of the lake thinks it's actually part of Italy. They even named a town Italy. It's right over there. The town of Italy. Look at that, though. Just fantastic. And look at this. I know I said I wouldn't point it out, but for some reason, here and here, we got a big, old, nasty patch of flat trees. All right, our next turn will be to exactly 300 degrees. So we'll come up on that in a minute, and as we dip the wing, we'll get a nice look at the town of Naples here. I like this live weather with a little bit of haze kind of hanging in the valleys. Very, very nice. There's the lake. I think the town of Italy is right up there in that valley. All right, 300 degrees. So here's where we're going to see some of the ski areas. About 5 miles to our north is Bristol Mountain Ski Resort, which I could not see when we were flying over it before, but we're going to see this one up here. We're going to come right over the top of it. Well, next to it anyway. But that place, Bristol Mountain, the one we can't see, opened in the 1960s as a destination for folks coming down from Rochester, which is about 30 miles to the north. And they said they've got 35 trails up there, which seems like a lot for terrain like this. You can see it's not super steep, which is my kind of skiing. Less opportunity to break my legs or get altitude sickness like I did out in Breckenridge. But this one down to our left up here is the smaller Hunt Hollow Ski Club, and that one's just a few miles outside of Naples here. And I bet the locals would tell you that the skiing is just as good, if not better, than the Italian Alps. I couldn't find anything about the history of this one, but they've got 21 trails down there. And you know what I forgot to look for? I bet you they've got a ski lift now that we've got our lifts and gondolas add-on pack, so we'll see if we can spot one up here. That does not look like 21 trails, unless I got a lot of bunny slopes. But I mean, that's kind of nice, because there aren't any big mountains around here, but to have 2 ski resorts, pretty cool. Alright, so can we see a lift anywhere? Maybe we're not close enough yet. They've got to have them in the U.S. for sure. I can understand some of those international ones. Oh, I think I can see it. I think this main one here has a lift going up there. Yep, if you got a really big screen, you'll be able to see it. Is that a lift? Well, this bar is just always in the worst possible spot. Let me look underneath it. Well, maybe there's not a lift on it. Maybe it's just a mark on the ground. I don't know. We'd have to be closer to really see it. We're pretty far away at this point. Okay, we got to turn again to, what is that, 290 something? Let me just make sure we took that turn right. My plane is right over the heading And a little NavMap. Let me just zoom in some. What does that say? Yeah, that's about right. Alright, so we're going to head almost directly west now towards our destination in Geneseo. And along the way to our north, we'll see the 4 remaining Finger Lakes in the chain, all much smaller than everything we've seen so far. The first one here is going to be that tiny little one right there, is I think pronounced Honeyo. I never heard anyone say it while I lived up here, and the internet had several pronunciations, so Chris, you'll have to correct me if I said that wrong. Chris is our member that lives out here. And the Seneca translation of that one makes a little more sense. It means the lying finger. So that's that little guy right there. And after that will be Canadice Lake, which is the pinky of all the fingers, coming in at just 3 miles long and 3 miles across, which is that little guy right there. I have to look back and forth because my notes are on the left side. And that one's only 0.3 miles across at its widest point. And it's really shallow too, not even getting down past 100 feet. Which I guess is kind of relative since it's still a good bit deeper than most of the coastal waters of western Florida here. And then we'll see Hemlock Lake. I think I got that one correct. We're actually going to fly across the very southern end of that one. Right up here at that next one. Look how incredible that is. And finally we'll see Conesus Lake, which is the westernmost of them all. Look how green the grass is. I bet that's about right for this time of year too. Up north the grass is so green. Up until today it's been pretty dead and dry down here in Jacksonville. We've had a real drought problem. Alright, so while we have a few minutes, I'll give you some more of the details and history of this plane. And I got most of this from the manual. They had a nice little history section right at the start of it. When they first started working on the design of this thing in the late 1930s, the intention was to compete with the Douglas DC-4, which was also in the earliest stages of development at the time. And like the DC-4, the first iterations of this one had 4 engines, but this one also had a double vertical stabilizer, kind of like one of the B-25s, which they quickly trimmed down to just 1 after some early test flights, along with dropping 2 of the engines. And the original power plants were Wright Cyclone radials, which proved to be a bit underpowered, so they upgraded those to Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasps, which is about the coolest name I could possibly think of. We're going a little slow. Let's just pick that up a little bit. Just a little bit. And that engine saw a lot of use during World War II, powering icons like the Corsair, Hellcat, Thunderbolt, which we flew over Tallahassee, as a matter of fact, the B-26 Marauder, the Douglas Invader, and the awesomely named Northrop P-61 Black Widow. But during the war, this plane saw early use as a troop and cargo hauler, even running some combat missions late in the war to drop airborne troops in Operation Varsity over northern Germany in 1945. But they quickly discovered that frequent engine fires and exploding fuel tanks did not get along well with flak cannons, so they pulled it out of battle operations and sent it back behind the lines as a hauler, which it was much better at doing, and not exploding. But where the C-46 really had the advantage over other transports in use at the time was its ability to travel really high and really far, which made it great for moving troops and supplies over the Himalayas, what they called the Hump, in the Pacific Theater. She saw widespread commercial use after the war, and China was flying them on regular routes all the way up until 1982. And, one interesting bit of aviation trivia for you guys, it was the last fixed-wing aircraft to leave Vietnam, as we were hightailing it out of that mess. Is this not incredible landscape or what? Yeah, there's not a lot of mountains, there's not a lot of huge landmarks sticking up, but it just looks nice. Lowers my blood pressure to be out here. So while we're on the subject of old planes, the place that we're coming into is a grass strip right next to the National Warplane Museum in the town of Geneseo. And I was really hoping someone would have made an add-on for that place, because you can see a bunch of old planes parked outside on the satellite map. We'll check them out at the end. I couldn't tell exactly what they were, maybe you guys would know. But unfortunately I couldn't find an add-on. And that is the one that on their site they do have 10 planes currently on display, but they said they get a lot of loaners that come in and out too, so I guess they're all airworthy unless they're hauling them out there on a truck. But definitely probably a neat place to check out if you're ever in the area. And I couldn't even find a building near the runway, so I don't know if it's farther off the runway or what, but it looks like it's just a field and a big farm out here. And if you are coming out here for some reason, you've got to cruise through Letchworth State Park, which runs along the Genesee River heading south from our destination. We're going to fly right over it as we're coming in. But it does not look great in the sim, which really broke my heart. And even on the satellite map, there's like it's blurry for some reason, so I just don't think they had good satellite image coverage. But it's got a huge gorge in it, and they got a bunch of big waterfalls. I came out here a few times when I was in Buffalo, and I was just beside myself with the natural beauty. I thought the waterfalls were better than Niagara, which I also went to a few times. They're not as big, of course, but they're big, and you can get right up next to them. But the thing with Niagara, when I went out there, I mean, you see it on the postcards and stuff, and you're just like, wow, this is amazing. You know, when you go out there and it's big and it's loud, but there is so much touristy, gimmicky crap around there, especially on the Canadian side, which is where you get the best view of the big falls. It was just, I don't know, it just seemed, this was back in the early 2000s. I was just not that impressed. I mean, it is a big waterfall, but it was not what I thought it would be, other than being a big waterfall. And this river even has a big dam that runs up through the northern end of the park called the Mount Morris Dam. And you know how I feel about big dams, but it did not model well in the sim, so we won't look at that. Alright, just trying to keep an eye on little NavMap because I'm going to turn the autopilot off here in just a second. We're going to start coming on down. Let's go ahead and do that right now. You know, something I wanted to mention to you guys, which I just think is awesome, and maybe I'm talking directly to some of you right now. We've had several people that have sent me comments saying that they're not even into simming on YouTube. They've commented this, but they like watching the channel for the tourism aspect of it, which I just think is awesome. And my hope, in a perfect world, get some of you guys to just take a shot at simming, especially some of you that are old gamers. I mean, I'm just at a phase of my life where I can't spend hours every night gaming, although I spend even more hours probably flying now. But the nice thing about simming is you hop in, hop out, don't feel like you just got to get back to it. Well, that's a lie too. I feel like I always got to get back in there. But, I mean, not only do you get to see all of this incredible stuff, literally see the entire world as it is from the comfort of your office or living room or wherever you set up your sim pit, but just learning the ins and outs of flying, seeing all these planes, learning how they work, learning the history of them, it is just an incredible hobby. And even just start small. Start on an Xbox if you have one. But the real evolution for me was jumping up to flying inside, not outside of all the planes. And that's when it just gets really, really fun. So welcome to all you guys that aren't into simming. Maybe I can light some kind of fire for you guys to get into it because it is just amazing. I'm a professional hobbyist. I have so many different hobbies, and most of them I burn out after about 6 months or so. I like to learn everything I possibly can, kind of gain some kind of mastery or whatever it is, and then I kind of burn out. But there is almost an infinite amount of things to do here in the sim, and new planes are always coming out. We got 2024 coming out here pretty soon. Just always so much stuff to do and see. All right, I'm going to try to get down to about 2,000 feet. So I need to... So this is the park right here, and you can see off that way. There's the Genesee River winding through it. And I don't know where the waterfalls are from here, but you're going to see the big gorge off to our right once we turn, which is a little bit stretchy and stuff. Again, it doesn't look fantastic. But check it out. Check out 2024, and I don't know what we're going to do when 2024 comes out. I'm kind of in that phase. I've noticed that, of course, Microsoft is cherry-picking all their trailer videos, and I'm trying to look off in the distance at places they're probably not trying to draw your attention to. See if they've really eliminated all the bad scenery around mountains and stuff where they'd be stretching and things like that. And in a lot of the videos, you can still see it. I mean, it looks like definitely up close, the grass and things like that look better. The clouds seem to look better, and of course they got animated everything, which I'm a little bit concerned about that. Because anytime there's anything animated in this version of it, you get big-time performance hits. So they got people walking around everywhere, all that kind of stuff. I'm a little nervous about that. And they've made a lot of pretty big boasts about other things, like every ship in the world modeled accurately where it should be in the world, which is incredible. But just like everything else, if you've got a bunch of stuff on the ground that's moving around and highly detailed, also performance problems. So my plan for right now, I'm just looking to the left to see if we're still tracking appropriately. All right, we're at 3,000 feet. Everything's looking good. All right, gear speed's 150, so we're cool with that. Let's just go ahead and throw those bad boys out. You notice there's no noise. I can feel it in my butt kicker that the gears have come down, but it doesn't really make any noises. You'll hear the flaps. I'm going to try to rebuild my computer for the launch of 2024. And I'm not a real big computer guy. My brother builds these things out for me. And he told me the other day that there's rumors of the 5090 coming out for a GPU, so we'll see about that. I'm sure it's not going to be cheap, but I want to try to just totally trick that thing out so that I won't be wishing I had a little bit more performance in any aspect of our flights around here. All right, we'll go ahead and give it full props. And I never did pull the mixture back to full rich, but that's okay. All right, let me just pay attention so I can at least get a look at where our field is. And I forgot to look at the gorge. It's off there in the distance. Let's see if we bring the swing up. Oh, it doesn't look great anyway. So I don't know. I think we're going to have to wait a few weeks just to see, you know, I don't know if I'm immediately going to jump to 2024 videos. Microsoft says they're going to keep 2020 alive until 2028. So I don't know. I guess we'll just kind of have to take that as it comes. But if it looks better than this, then why not start taking the flights out there? But my big fear is the performance hit. Really big. And I'm really wanting to get a VR headset too, but what I've heard from everyone so far, if you're flying around inside the plane most of the time, which I'm guessing most people would be... Alright, hold on just a second. I've got to find this runway. Alright, a little bit more over this way. Where are you, runway? Alright, we're still a little ways off. Is that they say that some of the really detailed stuff, like your gauges and stuff, are hard to see in VR. The resolution up close, they say, is not that great. And from what I've seen of people that are posting VR videos, they don't look as good as videos posted on YouTube that have been filmed outside of VR or recorded outside of VR. But particularly with helicopters, I heard that makes a really big difference, like with trying to land them. Alright, so the runway is going to be over here. I'm looking for this big spot right here. That's our marker. The runway is that thing right there. And we'll pick up the speed a little bit. Our approach speed is going to be around 110 miles per hour. And we'll go ahead and get one notch of flaps out. So we'll see. So anyway, about me not being a computer guy, if you guys have any recommendations, I would love to hear like what your dream build would be for a computer. Or if you have one that's working really, really well for you, let me know what all of your components are. I'd prefer to stay with NVIDIA cards just because I'm an NVIDIA fanboy. And I'm in the investing business, so of course I'm always following NVIDIA stuff. But let me know what kind of processor you'd have, motherboards, all that kind of stuff. I would love to just get the best of the best. Oh no, you gotta be kidding me. Alright, we're just gonna come in anyway. That'll probably come back on in a second. I can't believe that. We finally got a good flight in and we got the connection loss sign. That's alright, we're gonna push through it. Alright, we can pick it up a little bit more because I'm gonna throw out some more flaps. And maybe we'll get the connection back sign here in just a minute. So when this thing comes in, it is just, it's like an airliner. Nothing fast, big and slow, swaying from side to side, and we got a 5-knot crosswind now, and we're back. Great. Well, I wasn't wanting to have to tell you guys this, but this is like the 6th or 7th time I've tried this recording because I was messing with the autopilot so much before, so I'm just going to run it up. But based on what YouTube tells me, most people don't make it this far anyway. So thanks for sticking around if you're still here. Most people, I think, just jump right to the landing. They're wanting to see a crash. Maybe I'll crash for all you guys that just came into the end. Although it's hard to crash this thing. It lands pretty smooth. Alright, we'll go with another notch of flaps. Man, speaking of internet's going out, while I'm just killing time coming in here, my internet was down for 3 days this week. And just thinking about the last 20 years or so, I can't remember the last time my internet was out for more than 3 hours. So we currently use AT&T, and we used to have Xfinity back in the day, which used to be Comcast, and notorious for their horrible customer service, which is why I left them before. But every time I threatened to leave Comcast, they'd always offer me, you know, a discount for 8 months or something like that. So I called Infinity. I was like, guys, I can't, you know, we couldn't get in our house. The locks weren't working. The AC wasn't working. The garage door opened because everything's, you know, smart house stuff nowadays. So I said, I'm serious. I'm gonna switch back to Comcast. Show me how much you guys love me. And the lady's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, I don't know. Can you give me like a couple free months or something? She's like, no. I was like, can you do anything? And she's like, I can give you $10. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I was like, Comcast will be here tomorrow. They'll switch me over back to Xfinity. And she's like, well, sorry to lose you. And I was like, oh, well, that sucks. So it was kind of a veiled threat because I get a lot more speed from AT&T, but that's how that stuff goes. All right, final notch of flaps. And this is a pretty long runway too. So you can see, I don't see any structures. It looks like a van or something over there. But I don't know where the Air Museum is. And cut it. Down we go. Nice and smooth and easy. Jeez, it was even enough to bounce. And they said don't use the brakes, just let it slow itself down, so that's what we'll do. If it can do it. Alright, we'll just pull over to the side here because there's really no taxiways or anything. Heck, I might even just stay on the runway, why not? And we'll take a quick look at little NavMap. And then we'll be done with the finger legs. Alright, I'm gonna have to use some brakes because I don't want to roll off the end of the runway. This thing's heavy enough, it might just keep going. Yeah, and done. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and turn our parking brake back on. Open the window, of course. Let's open the other one, see if it gets even louder. little bit. All right, so we'll cut the mixture off. I'm not even going to mess with trying to get the fuel pumps off. Turn these guys off. That'll probably do it. It'll shut itself off anyway. All right, we'll leave everything else on for now. All right, so let's take a look at the satellite image here. So you can see, here's where the big park is, Letchworth. And look at that big square of blurriness. I don't know what that's all about. But the big dam is right down here. So here's where the big dam is. And I don't know what it's damming up because there's not much behind it. Look at that. But it's long. It's a big park. And let me see if we can see any of the falls while we're out here. They did not look like this in the sim, but let me just see if we can see any of them because they are pretty cool. I think it's just too blurry to really get a good look at them, unfortunately. All right, well, we're not going to mess with that. Let's go back to where we started from. So there's all 11 of the Finger Lakes, and we started between these two guys right here. And you can definitely see the Army Depot. Look at all these things. So I think the other biggest munitions storage area that we saw on any of our flights so far was probably that one down by Norfolk. They had a pretty good size one out there, but it was nowhere close. Maybe area-wise that one was bigger, but look how many bunkers they have out here. That is a ton of them. Too bad you can't see any white deer running around. So there's the runway. Not sure what they're using it for now. And there's the Who's Gal. And I don't know what this thing was. In Google, it just said that this was part of the Army Depot, but that is an interesting looking set of radials they have coming out for that. Not sure what that's all about. If anyone knows, let me know. It's probably secret because everything else I ever see. Oh, and they got Little Jail over there too. All right, so we flew up around the top, and here's where the Sampson State Park is. That used to be the Navy training camp and the Air Force training camp. And then here's where the brig was, or is, that they made into a museum now. And you can see that very well in the sim. And this little harbor right here. Little marina. That looked good. Oh, we got some contrails too. Nice little touch. So here's Dresden, named after the town in Germany. And here's where the sonar facility is. Boy, I bet they're doing some top secret stuff in that place. And that must definitely be a landfill, because that looks a lot like it, but it was all grassed over in the sim. That was that thing that was sticking up there. And then we came down here and flew past the town of Dundee, which I think that was the one where the guy started Seneca Foods. Big time place from a little time town. And here's the Outlaw Racetrack, the Outlaw Speedway. Boy, I bet they drink some beer in that place. Okay, so then we cut across Seneca Lake here, and here's Watkins Glen, and we'll get a nice view of the little park on this one. That's not a big town. And man, there was thousands and thousands and thousands of people at that race when I was out there. So I don't know where all those people are staying when they come out here. What is that stuff there? Oh, it looks like a little mine or something. So here's the park. 19 waterfalls over the course of just 2 miles. And you can see parts of it when you're coming down this road here. It looks really cool up in there. And at one point, they had a lot of mills out there, too. I wonder if there's any left, like as museums or anything. And then here's the International Speedway racecourse, racetrack. So when I was out here, we were set up right here along this strip. That's where we were, watching cars go by once every 2.5 minutes. Here's the town of Bradford, which is a little town of Bradford. And then here's where the Curtis Museum is, and now you'll be able to see the plane. See that right there? That's the only one you can see out here, but you can see it in the sim. It's flat, but you can definitely see it. If you fly a little bit closer and lower to it, you will see it for sure. And then we headed up here past the town of Prattsburg, which had the 5-mile train line running down to, so the town that it ran to was like, it's like right here. I don't know what was up with that very, very short train line. All right, so here's Naples, and then here's the town of Italy over here. Look at that. That was beautiful. That was right down that valley. Okay, so I thought it was up in this valley, but it's not. It was in the one prior. Not that there's much to see, but there's Italy, and there's Naples, where you can probably get a lot of wine. And then here's the one ski club. All right, so let's see. Oh, they had lifts on every one of those. That's what these dotted lines are, but I don't think those were modeled in the sim. But we weren't close enough. Maybe they are. I don't want to say that. But here's the other one. This is the bigger slope. Bristol Mountain. So people were coming from Rochester, which would probably also be a pretty cool city to fly over. So that's about 30 miles from there. And a lot of the Rochesterians, if that's what you call them, have little second homes and stuff out here. At least that's what I figured while I was down there, because I met a lot of people from the city. Okay, so then we came around the ski lodge there, and then back up to our park. And then, so let's look at this here. So there's the museum, and they've got some of the planes covered now, and I can't take that off because we're at the airport. Yep, I'm not going to be able to. So they got a couple big planes out there, and a big rotating crop that goes through there. So they probably have a few in that hangar. What do you guys think that is? Looks like a big transport of some kind. But anyway, that's it. That's the Finger Lakes, guys. Very cool flight. Not action-packed, not adrenaline pumping, but very, very chill. When you just had a rough day at work, just want to take it easy for a while, not think about anything, fly a cool plane, check it out. That plane was $10, by the way, right now in the marketplace if you don't have it. So I think it's probably worth it for 10 bucks for sure. Had an absolute blast. Learned all kinds of amazing things. Nice little trip down memory lane for me. Maybe one of these days we'll get up to Buffalo. Not really sure where we're going to go next, but it's probably going to be awesome. Can't wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.